Welcome back. My name is Brian Higgins. I am KPMG's US consulting leader for our manufacturing sector. I'm really excited to continue the conversation today around consumer privacy and automotive manufacturers. I'm also back with my two colleagues and leaders from our cybersecurity practice, Orson Lucas and Caleb Queern. We've had some really interesting insights coming out of the white paper, and we had a chance to talk about a couple of them. I'm really excited to dive into a little bit more on the future outlook and some of the challenges and opportunities that were highlighted. And Orson, maybe I'll start with you to maybe delve a little deeper into how specific privacy-enhancing technologies like the federated learning or secure multi-party computation are actually being applied in the automotive sector.
Yeah. So Brian, I think there were a number of more future-oriented technologies I think that we highlighted as part of the paper as well. I think at the most basic level, things like really novel ways of anonymizing the data, right? So, for example, if as an OEM, if they're collecting this data around, for example, braking patterns and within the vehicle, or kind of battery charging for an EV, et cetera. The extent to which they're not actually attributing that back to an individual removes some of the privacy obligations that you have, but are still valuable in aggregate to those companies. So at a fairly foundational and basic level, I think that type of technology, that type of strategy, whether it's data, synthetic data or data anonymization, things like that help to disaggregate that information are things that the OEMs are starting to use and that are valuable. I think what we found, some of the and so like in that way, things like federated learning as well, which is really just a fancy way of saying, sort of picking up on patterns of anonymized data across multiple different data points and being able to kind of bring those together into a more complete picture. Is something that those types of things are starting to be used. I think when we get into some of the more advanced types of technologies, secure multi-party computation, homomorphic encryption, things like that. I think what we found by and large are those are still in the future for a lot of these OEMs and aren't really actively being used. Yeah. But I have to expect as these companies get more advanced, as they really get sort of the foundations of the programs and everything really built out and well structured, and frankly get into much more complex use cases, that some of those types of tools are absolutely going to be a part of the picture going forward.
In the white paper, one of the things that we shine a pretty bright spotlight on is this challenge on the privacy regulations continuously evolving. Given that, how are automotive manufacturers preparing for the future changes or regulations that they know are going to come that may impact data collection and usage practices? How do you sort of get that defensive and offensive posture in place, recognizing that the fast pace of regulation evolution here?
On one side of the house, they're preparing their governance and kind of the compliance side. On the other side, they're investing in new engineering capabilities that once these regulations come down the pipe, hopefully the right amount and the right quality and quantity of regulations, that they're prepared and that they can move quickly to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a must-have, not a nice-to-have at this point, that capability that you just described. And just building off of that, what do you see as sort of the next big challenge or opportunity in automotive privacy? And how should companies begin preparing to address or take advantage of that?
Frankly, the challenge and the opportunity, at least in my view, or the primary one, are probably one and the same, which is that what we're dealing with today is largely a privacy challenge. I think what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow in this space is more of a data challenge. The volume, the amount of data that's coming through these connected cars, connected devices, really more holistically, the Internet of Things, which allow for very precise geolocation information coupled with driving habits, coupled with personal preferences, everything from the music you listen to the places that you go on your map application. All of these things together are a tremendously rich environment for OEMs to potentially to be able to capitalize on. So that's the opportunity side of it, but the challenge part of it is making sure that they do it in a way that's consistent with their principles, with their privacy notice, what they communicate to customers, and ultimately what's in line with industry norms and expectations, and frankly, consumer expectations as well.
Yeah.
Is the biggest thing, I think.
But that whole notion of solving for an opportunity on, I'll call it data monetization on a broader, basis, has been out there for a while and is a big priority, but doing it in a fashion that doesn't trip any of these wires that we've talked about, either regulatory or consumer privacy or right. It's a minefield,
Exactly.
to be sure. And when we talked about some of the survey insights, one of them was, a relatively small portion, 24% of the respondents currently practicing data minimization. Talk a little bit about that. Well, what does that mean? What's the takeaway with that particular stat? And then what hurdles are preventing wider adoption of data minimization?
When we say data minimization, what we're talking about here in technical terms is the only collecting the information that you need to fulfill a business purpose, and only retaining that information so long as it's required to fulfill that business purpose. So it's a very, very easy thing to say and a very foundational concept, but the challenge is in practice, not just OEMs, but you broaden the aperture and look at other industries as well. This happens really across the board in a lot of cases where companies really collect everything and then sort it out later and figure out what they don't need and let the rest fall out. So beyond just the data sprawl issues that go along with that, there are issues with overcollection and sort of misaligned usage of information, and that's where that data minimization concept comes in. One of the biggest hurdles, I think, to that is really just well ingrained, well entrenched processes and ways of doing business. So, for example, you have a marketing team that proactively collects and uses all of this information to be able to, do exactly what their charter is, which is to very effectively and closely target consumers in a way that's value add to them. If they're using data, though, that's not really permissible for that use, it could be really problematic. So, I think just what it comes down to is a really thoughtful, proactive, we talked about it before, but really by design way of thinking about what information you really need to collect within the context of the connected vehicle, and what that information is going to be using for, and then making sure there are good guardrails and governance practices in place such that the information, more information isn't collected and the information that is collected is only used for the appropriate purpose.
And one of the things that we've talked a little bit about was the pivotal role of third-party integrations and enhancing the vehicle functionality. And Orson, to get at some of that opportunity that you talked about, that the prize, certainly third-party integrations are contributing to realization of that opportunity. They also contribute to the complexity of navigating all of the potential privacy risks that brings. Talk a little bit about how OEMs and third parties are working together to mitigate those potential privacy risks.
I think what we'll see OEMs do, not surprisingly, is leverage some of the muscle they've built in their legacy third-party or vendor management environments and programs for in the same way that they would increase the likelihood that their suppliers abide by their expectations for other important outcomes, whether it's security or otherwise. We'll see that extend into the privacy arena as well, and where you have data sharing agreements and perhaps some semi-regular audits to make sure that only the right data is collected and held for its original purpose and duration. I think one of the things to keep an eye on, perhaps, is what we see in other nearby precedents for how large organizations handle vast amounts of consumer data. We know that still, like, this is a work in progress for like web browsers, for example. We see their, the way that they help deliver privacy outcomes is improving over time. It's earlier for the OEMs, we know, but one of the challenges in the web browsing space is still like third-party data brokers, which are really kind of challenging to get a handle on and continue to cause challenges for consumers because once the data is out, it's out. We may see that in the future in the OEM space and vehicles as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. It's a fantastic point. With that, I want to thank you both for the insights and for joining me today on this conversation. For more information, folks can be sure to check out our KPMG white paper that we're referencing here, Driving Trust, Consumer Privacy, and Automotive Manufacturers. With that, I thank you very much for joining us and look forward to continuing the conversation.